The sterile, quiet corridors of hospitals are meant to be safe havens, places where lives are saved and patients are cared for. But what happens when the person entrusted with the power to heal becomes the very thing that takes those lives? Charles Cullen, a seemingly ordinary nurse, spent 16 years working in hospitals across New Jersey and Pennsylvania, all while harboring a deadly secret. His victims were vulnerable, often critically ill. The weapon? A lethal dose of poison that no one could trace. This is the shocking case of the killer nurse. Charles Cullen's journey began in the early 1980s. He was a quiet, seemingly harmless man, a nurse with an unremarkable past. Born in 1960 in West Orange, New Jersey, Cullen grew up in a troubled household. His father was distant, and his mother, whom he adored, died when he was just a teenager. It was a tragic loss that would forever affect Cullen's psyche. He enlisted in the US Navy, where he served as a submariner, but he was discharged after a series of mental health issues arose. It was then that he pursued a nursing career. After graduating with a nursing degree, Cullen took jobs at various hospitals, starting in the early 1980s. On the surface, he was a diligent worker, but beneath the white scrubs, there was something darker brewing inside him. Cullen was a man of contradictions. He was intelligent, but also deeply troubled. He had a history of depression, anger issues, and a deep-seated resentment toward the world around him. But even more chilling, he seemed to take pleasure in the control he held over life and death. His victims, the elderly, the critically ill, and those on life support, were often seen as nothing more than statistics to him. At each hospital, Cullen was trusted to care for patients who were on the brink of death, but no one ever suspected that he was the one pushing them closer to the edge. His method of choice, a lethal cocktail of drugs, often digested into their systems through intravenous lines, hidden in plain sight. Cullen's weapon of choice was a mix of toxic drugs, digoxin, a heart medication, and lethal doses of insulin, which could cause fatal drops in blood sugar levels. He would often add the drugs to patients' IV bags or inject them directly into their lines. The doses were small enough to go unnoticed, but enough to kill. It was the perfect method, a slow, almost imperceptible process that allowed him to remain in the shadows while his patients suffered. And the worst part? It was happening in plain sight, within the very walls where he worked. Charles Cullen's reign of terror continued, and over time, the bodies began to pile up. The hospitals where he worked saw a strange pattern, inexplicable deaths, patients dying from causes that simply didn't add up. Nurses and doctors noted the odd deaths, but never put the pieces together. No one questioned the quiet, seemingly inconspicuous nurse. In fact, Cullen seemed to be just another part of the hospital machinery, an invisible figure working behind the scenes. It wasn't until 2003 that someone finally took notice. A nurse named Amy Lochran had worked alongside Cullen for years and, like many others, had never suspected the dark truth. But as the hospital where they both worked began to investigate a string of mysterious deaths, Amy began to question everything she thought she knew about the man she had trusted. Amy was the one who raised her suspicions, and when she started looking back at Cullen's past, she began to see the terrifying pattern of deaths that followed him from hospital to hospital. The investigation into Cullen began with a series of small, yet strange occurrences, a set of patient deaths that couldn't be explained by natural causes. Amy, who was now deeply concerned, went to hospital administrators and law enforcement with her fears. They launched an internal investigation, but they were up against a killer who was always a step ahead. Cullen had a methodical, patient approach. His killings were subtle, his actions calculated. By the time authorities started looking into his past, it was clear that Cullen had been moving from job to job, leaving a trail of bodies behind him. Over the course of his career, Cullen had worked at more than 10 hospitals across New Jersey and Pennsylvania. He would slip into a new job, work for a while, And then, when the heat started to rise, he would move on. He was a ghost, never staying in one place long enough to raise suspicion, but his perfect crime was about to unravel. In December of 2003, Charles Cullen's reign of terror finally came to an end. A breakthrough in the investigation led authorities to finally confront him. Armed with evidence of multiple murders, they arrested Cullen, who, surprisingly, admitted to killing at least 40 patients. But some experts believe the true number could be much higher. Cullen's motive: it was a strange cocktail of revenge, power, and an overwhelming sense of control. He said he did it because he could. He wanted to be in charge, to decide who lived and who died. It was a sadistic need to assert dominance in a world where he felt powerless. But even after his capture, the full extent of Cullen's crimes is still shrouded in mystery. Some of his victims were never identified, and the full list of his hospitals and crimes remains a chilling enigma. How many more people did Charles Cullen kill? And could he have been stopped sooner if more attention had been paid to the subtle clues? The story of Charles Cullen is one that will haunt the hospitals that trusted him and the families who never knew what was truly happening behind those sterile walls. Charles Cullen's motivations were shrouded in mystery, even to him. To understand his actions, we need to look deeper into his psyche. Cullen himself confessed that the murders gave him a sense of power and control, something he had never felt before in his life. But this was no ordinary desire for power. No, Cullen's need to control life and death was rooted in his overwhelming feelings of worthlessness and abandonment. Born into a family filled with dysfunction, Cullen's early years were marked by isolation. His father was distant, and his mother's death left him devastated. These early experiences planted the seeds of resentment that would grow into something far darker. At the age of 17, Cullen enlisted in the U.S. Navy, seeking structure and discipline. But even in the military, he struggled. His mental health issues led to his discharge, and the sense of failure would follow him. His quest for control, for a place where he could be in charge, was just beginning. So, Cullen turned to nursing, believing it would give him the power to heal others. Ironically, it became the perfect setting for his horrific actions. In the sterile, regulated environment of the hospital, Cullen found a place where he could not only heal, but also destroy. The very vulnerability of his patients, their dependence on him, was a perfect fit for his twisted needs. They weren't just patients to him. They were pawns in a deadly game he controlled from behind the scenes. Cullen, by all accounts, was a conscientious worker, rarely drawing attention to himself. This made him the perfect predator. But his murders weren't random. They were calculated. Each killing was carefully planned, often spanning months. Cullen chose patients who were already in critical condition, often elderly or terminally ill. Their death would be seen as a natural part of their medical decline, and no one would suspect foul play. He would inject them with lethal doses of poison, digoxin, insulin, drugs that could mimic the symptoms of heart failure or diabetic shock. The doctors and nurses were left baffled, unable to pinpoint the cause of death. But there was a deeper psychological layer to Cullen's method of killing. He wasn't just taking lives to feel powerful, he was also punishing himself. In his confession, Cullen revealed that part of him believed he was helping the patients he killed, ending their suffering in a way that only he could control. It was a bizarre justification for his actions, but it shows how twisted his worldview had become. He spoke about his killings in a detached manner, as if they were an extension of his job, a necessary evil in his mind. Even when suspicion began to build, Cullen was calm. He manipulated the investigation, evading capture for years. His ability to hide in plain sight was a testament to his psychological manipulation. He knew how to read people, how to make them believe that nothing was wrong. He had the perfect cover, a quiet, reliable nurse who blended in with his colleagues. It wasn't tea until the persistence of Nurse Amy Lochran and the growing body count that authorities finally began to close in on him. It was Amy who first noticed the strange pattern of deaths. After years of working alongside Cullen, she began to piece together the unsettling truths. Cullen's involvement in the deaths was undeniable, but what made it even more chilling was the fact that he had been so methodical, so patient. He chose his victims carefully, and he never once broke character. Even when confronted, Cullen remained calm and collected, almost eerily detached. He admitted to killing at least 40 patients, but many believe the true number is much higher. In the aftermath of Cullen's arrest, the public was left reeling. How could someone who had been trusted with life cause so much death? But as investigators dug deeper, they realized that Cullen's story didn't end with his arrest. There were still questions that remained unanswered, dark secrets that had yet to be uncovered. What drove Cullen to become a killer? Was it just a thirst for control, or was there something more at play? Was he really helping those he murdered, as he claimed? Or was it something darker, something rooted in an unshakable desire to make the world feel his pain? But here's the twist. As Cullen's trial began, more disturbing revelations came to light. Cullen, the quiet, unassuming nurse, had manipulated everyone around him, not just the patients he killed, but his colleagues, his friends, even the hospitals that employed him. Was there a darker conspiracy at play? Could the hospitals have been complicit in his killings? Were there other nurses and staff members who might have known more than they let on? If you were shocked by Charles Cullen's story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more true crime tales. Drop a comment below with your thoughts or any cases you'd like us to cover. Stay tuned as we uncover more shocking truths. Stay aware and stay safe.